Today we're going to discuss Entreprenetics, the startup scientist. It's an interesting way of looking at startups and how to build startups, but basically you can look at it from a perspective of a scientist. And when you look at it from a perspective of a scientist, you will come down to the realization that you will never see failure as failure ever again. Because when you look at the scientific method, okay, if you look at the scientific method and look at it as a triangle. Okay, so obviously it's composed of a couple of components. One is observation, the other one is hypothesis, and then experimentation. So think about it. Scientists are really not much different than entrepreneurs. They look at they observe something, some phenomenon, and then what they do is they derive a hypothesis about some observation. Well, that's not any different than entrepreneurs. They see some kind of a market evolving, or they get an idea for a product, and so based on some observation or need from the marketplace, and then they form a hypothesis in terms of how they could solve that problem, market problem, customer problem, you name it. And then what they do is then they experiment. Okay, so the scientific method is obviously three things: observation, hypothesis, experimentation. And sometimes it doesn't even involve observation. So there's many instances where, for instance, you just have a gut feel or intuition or a hypothesis. In fact, from one of the startups, the whole concept is not even based on observation. It was actually based on a hypothesis of a market evolving in a certain way. Whether it's going to happen or not comes down to experimentation. So what happens is that, when I funded entrepreneurs, one of the key, cool things I would ask him is that, hey, have you ever failed before? And the gamut of responses is really interesting. Some you could really tell were embarrassed of their failure. Others were like proud to wear it like a badge. They had a failure badge, like I failed, so what? And so it was very interesting to me from a psychology of the entrepreneur to see how different people look at failure. And if you're an entrepreneur, you're gonna have failure. I'm sorry, very seldom do you see an entrepreneur hit it the first time and then from then on never fails. In fact, if you find an example, call me. But even if the entrepreneur succeeded the first time, eventually as they move on to different ideas, they will experience some form of failure or lack of market traction. I like to call it the experiment failed. So if you ever felt bad about failing, no matter how bad you failed, I want you to put your scientist hat on and think like a scientist. Because if you think like a scientist, then anything that you've ever done and you failed in is just an experiment. Experiment before you make it big. So look at all your failures, any failures that you've had in the past, and just scratch out from failure, experiment. That's what you had. You were experimenting. That's all you're doing. And you continue to experiment until you hit it, until your experiment develops into something big. That's all. That's all you got to think about. Think of yourself as a startup scientist. Until next time.